Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun, and this is our Only Murders in the Building Season 4, Episode 9 reaction and review. Can you guys believe it? We are so close to the finale. If you are coming out of this episode being of two minds, I more than understand because I think comedically, like the show is technically a comedy after
Yeah.
all. This is one of the funniest episodes I think they've had in a long time. I think Selena in particular, her line about the sweaters, the look on her face when she's told in order to scream. Like Selena was hilarious in this episode.
So was Oliver. I
Yeah.
mean, he had that line where they were like talking about Ron Howard, and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, good, a celebrity this season." I fell out of my chair. He's so funny.
Yeah, like comedically, this is a really good episode. I don't know how you come out of Escape from Planet Congo and just sort of be like, oh, I got a few good belly laughs. The cameo I thought with Ron Howard was even really good.
He's so funny when he gee whiz that situation. I laughed so hard. This was easily for me the funniest of the season. I really had a lot of good laughs in this one.
Yeah, they really justified the celebrity cameo here. And really, from the moment that we knew that this was going to be a famous director, I'll admit, I was sitting back here being like, please be Ron Howard. Please be Ron Howard. Because it's just like, one is, his comedic legacy.
Yeah.
Two, I'm guessing this is another situation where he knew Steve and Marty and one of them called him up and was just sort of like, hey, do you want to do this? So that's the great stuff
Yeah.
that's coming out of this episode. And now here's where we enter the ... I know that there were a lot of people who guessed that Marshall was the one behind all of that. Give you guys a
Yes.
pat on the back for that.
Absolutely give yourself a pat on the back for that one because this season was tough.
Yeah.
Matt has said it a few times. This season was Only Murders in the Building on hard mode. It was really tough. So if you were one of the people that figured out that it was Marshall, definitely give yourself a pat on the back for that one. I mean, the show does follow a formula. Like season 1 and season 2, they had like a really big episode with Jan, with Poppy. They did it this season 2 with Marshall around like episode 5, 6, 7 was like a whole episode about the killer. So, I mean, if we're following the formula, Marshall's been there.
Here's the problem. As in, there are a lot of problems. The show still has another episode here. So this is not a situation where they're going to just completely blow through the rest of this without any explanation for a lot of the different holes that don't make a lot of sense. Right now, there are just a lot of problems. There are a lot of things that do not make sense within the context of the story we're seeing insofar as Marshall's motivations, how he could have done all of this, how you could explain certain parts of what actually happened the night that Saz was killed. Like there's still a lot that they have to figure out. And that's why I'm coming out of this episode being just like, I don't know if I'm really there yet. I don't know if I'm really buying it yet, just because there's a lot of issues. And by buying it, by the way, I don't mean that I don't think that Marshall did it. I think that Marshall did do it. It's just the show has to do a better job explaining everything.
There are some holes that do need to be filled in, and I think that we'll get them in the finale. But I do have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Whether or not you guessed Marshall and you got it right, or got it wrong and guessed somebody else like me, do you feel satisfied with just this episode, with how much information they gave or didn't give for him actually being the killer? Do you feel satisfied that he's the killer and you're like, yeah, this all makes sense and why? Or are you kind of like, yeah, there's some things here that just don't add up yet, and we could get there, but we're just not there yet?
Well, we're going to get into all of the issues we have at present. We'll see if the show resolves all of them or not. But be sure to hit that subscribe button. We also have a preview coming up for the Only Murders in the Building finale. And in addition to that as well, our theory discussion this week, we are going to look at all of the upcoming possible victims, because we know this show loves to kill people off in the finale, right? Like, who are they going to take out? We have some ideas we're going to go through there.
And thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. It really does help us here at the channel. And if you want to help us further, you can join our Patreon. We'll have a link for you below. We are currently covering The Penguin exclusively with reviews every single week over there. So it's the only place that you can get them. You can join our Patreon for that. We are also going to be covering exclusively over there Landman and Dune Prophecies. So we're very excited about these two shows that are going to be coming up, and it's the only place you'll be able to get those weekly reviews as well. So please join our Patreon. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, let's get into a little bit of the background. So there was a lot of us out there, me included, that felt like Glenn wasn't the protege, that he was the person who stepped in when the protege messed up big time. So my biggest issue, I guess, with this messed up big time is like, yeah, he messed up. It's his, okay, so we had Saz training Marshall to be a stunt person. It's his very first job. It's his very first day. We know that she was getting a call being like, hey, we need you to get a crew together and come and do all the stunt work on this movie. Okay, great. So how much time did she really have to train Marshall? Probably not very much time. And then gave him a really big stunt. A friend of mine is a stunt person who does exactly this, firework. He gets set on fire all the time. But it was something that took him a long time to really learn to be able to perfect. Here, it's like, okay, Marshall didn't have that much time. Saz knew that. She explained as much as she could. He seemed to get as much of it as he did. But then he had this like real excitement. Oh man, I have a chance to talk to Ron Howard and show him my script. Okay, cool. That happens all the time. Where I'm kind of stuck is he did everything correctly. He didn't wait for that final 30 seconds. And there was a fire crew around him that put him out. I was just like, why is that fire crew still working? Why didn't they all get fired as well? They should have stayed there with him for the full 30 seconds. That's their only job, is to make sure that he doesn't reignite and that he is put out. So they just put him out and left and let him get up, go over to Ron Howard and burn off Ron Howard's eyebrows, where I'm like, okay, that's a really funny haha. I enjoyed that. But at the same time, I expected for him, if he's going to be like, you will never work in this town again, and that's what's happened to him, and that is what's happened to him, I expected that somebody got seriously injured, like in the hospital injured, not somebody's eyebrows got burnt off for a first day mistake. And for a lot of people, you're on a job, first day, first week, first month even, you're absolutely going to make mistakes. And yes, he should have been fired, but the way that it was like put together where it's like, and you're never working in this town again, it is over for you, your career is over. It's like, this guy worked for one day and he burned off your eyebrows. I feel like he could have been fired and maybe worked on his craft should he want, but he didn't need to be like, and you're never working again. I had a really hard time believing it.
Well, and this is the crummiest part of this reveal, because I think there are certain things they'll try to explain more in the finale. This is the part of it I don't think that they can explain more in the finale, because they basically have set up this situation where Marshall gets let go from this project because of what happened. And yeah, I understand that, safety on set is incredibly important. It's paramount to any production. Like, all of that is 100% true. But as you lined up here, it's not just exclusively his fault that this happened. The fire crew should have done a better job. Like, I've been on the set for a couple of times of like Chicago Fire and Station 19, and I've seen some of the fire crews who work and sort of the way in which they operate things. I know this show kind of stretches believability at times, but they're really, really stretching the believability that Marshall would even be able to put himself in this situation. But then beyond all of that, we get into the issue I'm struggling with sort of the most with all of this, is trying to understand fully Marshall's full motive behind what exactly he was apparently going to do. He didn't have a lot of experience as a stunt person. Sure, this happened, but he's going to hold this against Saz to the point where he's going to have some crazy obsession with her when he is the one who made the mistake. Sure, the fire crew could have done something too, but he is the one who made the mistake here. She gave him an opportunity to be on this set that he would have never, ever been on otherwise. She had done more for him than anybody in this town, as far as we know. And there was no evidence before this. I know they met very briefly, but he didn't seem in the time leading up to that like he was some sort of crazy person who was just going to, cling to Saz and want terrible things to happen to her.
No, this was 2 years in the past, and it
Yeah.
seems like in that time, he's felt he's needed to change his name and wear a fake beard and
Yeah.
change what he looks like because of one mistake that burnt off some eyebrows on a set, that his whole life
Yeah.
had to change for him to be able to stay in the entertainment business, to be a writer. And it kind of felt like, okay, yeah, maybe you're not going to be a stunt person anymore,
Yeah.
but why would you need to change your name to be a writer? There's no danger that comes with that. So, because we've kind of learned from Bev, where she's just like, oh man, every script he turns in is worse than the
Yeah.
last, and we know that he stole this script from Saz, my tinfoil hat is that's the motive, that he was just like, oh man, I'm not as good as I think I am, but here's Saz who gave me this other opportunity. Oh, and it turns out she has this really great script that I also, could maybe get my hands on. I think he did. He got his hands on the script, whether he was still friendly with her at that time, or he was harassing her at that time and he was going to her apartment and was like, oh, I'll take this. I'll scratch off her name. I'll put on my name. I'll give it to Bev. And then Bev's like, amazing. I love this. Excellent. You got the job. And then he's like, oh no, I stole his script. So she's eventually gonna tell Bev, which I think is what that phone call was at the party of last season, that she was like, hey, you don't know me, and this is what's going to be going on. I need to have a talk with you about the Only Murders project because I'm really the writer. But because she didn't get to that, we had Marshall step in and did do what he did. I mean, I know we haven't actually seen him kill Saz yet. So is there possibly that he didn't kill Saz and he only killed Glenn? It's a possibility, but I do think that he is the person that killed Saz as well. And I think that's the motive, that he put himself in a bind where he just needed to then keep that secret. He was desperate. It's Poppy 2.0 kind of all over again, where a protege has killed somebody else to kind of forward their career. And here we are with this same kind of feeling again and the same kind of possible motive again.
Yeah, and I'm admittedly frustrated by it just because I didn't like the motive that Poppy had in season 2. Like, that was my biggest problem with the entirety of that season, which I thought was otherwise really good. It's just here, I don't fully grasp that Marshall, at least the Marshall we had sort of been set up, is going to go 0 to 60 with all of this. I'm sure you're probably right when it comes to how he found out about the script, and that's why they made a real point of sort of showing that, okay, somebody's been in Saz's house, they've kind of dropped enough seeds that's probably how he figured all of that out, how he was able to move forward with the script. That's why Saz issued the warning that she did to Bev. And now we get to some of the functional issues, and this is the stuff. Dear Only Murders John Hoffman, everybody on the show, please explain some of this, because my biggest question mark, first and foremost, is how did Marshall know that Saz was going to be in that apartment that night? You can argue that, okay, he followed her to the Arconia.
Yeah.
Sure, there was going to be some sort of party there. And yeah, Saz and Charles were really good friends, but if there was a party there, X, Y, or Z, maybe Saz visits and then they all go to the diner or something else. You don't know that she is going to ever be in that apartment.
Not only that, but my question is, how did he know about the Dudenoff apartment?
Yes.
If he is just another student of Dudenoff, then I'm just going to be like, come on. I understand that they've set it up that Dudenoff had lots of students and lots of people he cared about and given everybody his passcode. But if Marshall is over there and he's got the passcode to get into Dudenoff's place, there's only a couple of explanations for it.
Yeah.
And it feels like he's just going to be another student of Dudenoff. And that's how he was able to go there and get in there, because we even saw him waiting for Mabel outside the apartment that's not her apartment. Like, how does he know what is going on?
Yeah, I've tried to think of some theories as to how he would know about this apartment, whether it be, okay, the brother sisters, did they have some conversation with him?
They ain't talking to the writer. They're too snotty for that.
No, I know that's the problem. And even if he did talk to one of these other people about it, why are they going to give him, of all people, the passcode? Like, that makes it
Right.
even more complicated. So, I mean, the easiest answer is yes, he has some sort of history with Dudenoff, but that's also not a particularly fun answer. And I also kind of feel like if he has a history with Dudenoff, wouldn't the brother sisters maybe know that he had a history with Dudenoff, and they talk so much about their own history with Dudenoff?
Maybe. I mean, he's changed his name. He's changed what he look like. He's
Yeah.
got the fake beard. I'm not sure. The brother sisters especially feel like they just wouldn't notice him because there is a weird hierarchy on set a lot of times where the writers are unappreciated. And, we just saw this with the strikes that went
Mhm.
on where it was kind of like a lot of, the directors all got wrapped up nice and easily and quickly or whatever. But the writers went on and on and on because nobody was taking them seriously. And
Yeah.
that hierarchy happens on set as well, that I think the brother sisters would just be like, give us the script and move it along.
Okay. Here's the next big question. Now that we've established all the issues,
Oh, we rolling with our beef hats.
This
I
is-
can't wait to see the comments.
this is going to be fun. This is like, you go to one of those like Brazilian steakhouses. That's what's going on here. But no, okay. Let's talk about the sniper itself here.
Mhm.
I know that the show tried to, I guess, drop another hint with this
Mhm.
by having Marshall note that he doesn't need glasses. He's got like 20/10 vision. He
Yep.
can see really, really well.
Yeah.
Just because you have really good eyesight does not necessarily mean you're going to be proficient as a sniper. That'd be like somebody is 7 feet tall, and that automatically means they're going to be great at basketball, but maybe they're really slow and they can't shoot to save their lives. And it's just like, okay, you've got one thing going for you, Marshall, here, but you guys have to figure out a way to sell us that how is a writer suddenly this proficient? I mean, you could sell it that, he learned a lot about this stuff while training to be a stunt person, but they already explained that he was not exactly a stunt person for a long period of time here.
That was my theory for a long time, is that if it was a stunt person,
Yeah.
that they would have had, if they had years of training, they know all these different things that they could
Yeah.
possibly be called in to do. And that might be one of them, and that they would be trained in this. But we know that 2 years ago when Saz got the call, it was get a crew together and we're filming
Yeah.
soon. So Marshall was only with her for maybe a month or two.
Yeah. And
It's not nearly enough time to get a perfect shot like that straight through
Yeah.
a window, straight in the chest.
well, that's the thing. I'm sure maybe they'll try to be like, oh,
He was a hobbyist,
Yeah.
or it was something he was interested in.
that may be true. I just hope that they don't say something like, oh, he just got lucky with the one with Saz, and they try to use, oh, Zach ended up getting hurt with Glenn later on, and that's like the evidence here that he's not perfect in a lot of this.
However, he did take that shot and it hit Glenn right in the head.
Mm.
So, and it looked like he was trying to actually kill Glenn. So if he hit Saz straight in the chest, perfect. Glenn straight in the head, perfect.
Mhm.
Didn't know that he had the plate, so didn't know it was going to ricochet off. He's really good at this. Like, that's not two lucky shots.
No.
If they try to like sweep that away with just pure luck, I'm not going to be happy with that answer. It needs to be something a little bit more like this is something that he does as a hobby, that
Yeah.
he's really into, that it's, something that he grew up with. Anything but two lucky shots.
Okay. Here's another big part of this. Here's another slab of beef, guys. But this one is the one I'm honestly the most curious about. And this is where, we can have a little bit of fun with theories. What about the incinerator? How in the world did Marshall know that there was an incinerator in this apartment? There's a couple of different ways you can go with this. You could
Mhm.
say, okay, if he thought through all these other things that, he knew Saz was going to be there that night, maybe he did something to, keep Charles at bay for whatever reason so that Saz went into the apartment instead of him. I've said for a long time, I've always wondered why Charles just didn't go and, get the stuff himself. But they really have to explain did he do research on the Arconia to learn this incinerator was there? He's clearly athletic enough that he could have gotten back and gotten over in the amount of time that they framed. It's just like, that's the part of it that I am just so stuck on.
Okay, here's my tinfoil
All right.
hat. He was part of the Dudenoff crew. I think this is the only explanation that makes sense. He was either a student of Dudenoff or he knew Dudenoff another way, because we have spent so much time with the Westy Besties and Dudenoff this season. There has to be another connection.
Yeah.
And Marshall, knowing the apartment, knowing the code to get into the apartment, knowing about the incinerator, I feel like the Westy Besties told the story, because every time they told the story, it seemed like another person appeared, and that now maybe Marshall will also appear, and that he was part of this group as well, and that they've just kind of left it out because they didn't think that this had any relevance to the story, or they're not friends with him anymore, or whatever it is. But I feel like he was probably part of that group, and that would explain the incinerator and the apartment and the code to the apartment. That would at least wash away some of that.
That is
and I would believe that.
Yeah, it's the easiest solution. It's the most believable solution. I'm going to get crazy, though, for a minute, because I like to be crazy. So this is what I have still trying to sow as many seeds as possible here to this grand idea that Lester is the big bad behind everything, the Moriarty, if you will. And so I've been kind of wondering about this idea of, okay, Marshall takes out Saz. Okay, that happens. Why is Marshall at that point so intent on being like, oh, I need to go and dispose of this body? I mean, maybe it is because he thinks that it's all going to come back to him eventually, and that would make a certain amount of sense. But we're also still dealing with a limited amount of time here for everything to happen. And
he didn't do that with Glenn. He just left Glenn there.
Yeah, he just left. So there's just some questions. There are some things here that make me a little bit confused. Plus also the idea that he's going to be able to take Saz's body, go all the way down to the incinerator. Nobody's going to notice any of this going on, by the way, as it's happening. I still like the idea that Lester heard something happen that night. We don't know exactly what he was doing at every hour. He has access to all the different, buildings, rooms in the Arconia. He goes up there, sees the body, realizes that because he is the 6th Avenue slasher from the past, he does not want more dead bodies showing up in the Arconia, because that's eventually going to bring more attention to him. He goes, puts Saz's body on the luggage cart, takes it down to the incinerator, burns Saz, does not take the phone because he doesn't really think about that. He's just like, I got to get rid of this body as soon as possible. Marshall comes over, gets the phone. That's how he has access to the phone and is able to do all that. That's fun. It's probably not what's happening, but it's fun.
Okay, let's talk about the phone, which is something that's been a bit of a bee in my bonnet this whole season, that they knew that the killer had Saz's phone since the premiere and didn't say or do anything about it this whole time.
Yeah.
And it ends up being the thing that ends up getting Glenn killed. So I know we're beefing this whole video here, but I'm extra putting my beef hat on here.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
Why did Marshall kill Glenn? This has been something that I've just been sitting on, not trying to wrap my head around it, because we know that Glenn did recognize Marshall at one point and was like, hey, Lassie, you got a beard or whatever. Nothing in the way that Glenn spoke to him signaled to Marshall that Glenn knew something, that Glenn knew that he took the script or knew anything at all. He just recognized him. Nothing else. I was just like, well, why are you coming to kill Glenn at this point? You don't know that he's put anything together, that he's going to say anything. You've known that he's been around this whole time. Like, all he did was recognize you, but also didn't say anything. So, like, what? I think this all stems back to what happened on set, where he felt that burning off Ron Howard's eyebrows was enough, that he had to change what he looks like, change his name, change everything about himself, basically go into hiding for a mistake that didn't, hurt Ron Howard in a way that he was not able to function anymore. Like, I understand that it burned off his eyebrows, but this
Yeah.
seems so extreme that he had to hide who he is to this point that Glenn is just like, hey, looking good, like your beard, whatever. And
Yep.
Marshall's like, oh no, you have to die now. What?
Marshall being so paranoid about this to the extent that he's willing to take out Glenn because he is so paranoid that Glenn may know something, even though there's no evidence. This is the guy who, by the way, is still seeing rats everywhere, that Glenn is going to be able to go and, pun intended, rat him out on something.
Yep.
It at least helps to explain away my other big question mark. Is just like, did this movie not background check Marshall in any way to find out his past, anything he was working on, the fact that it was, but maybe he sort of created a, whole identity, something that could go through all, because if he was so paranoid that he was going to take out Glenn, I got to believe he probably knew they would look into him, and maybe he created a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, Marshall even claimed earlier this season he had an alibi, that he was at a comedy show. He was willing to show them a video of his comedy routine if they hadn't been like, no. Like, this all could have ended so much faster.
Absolutely, but nobody wants to sit through an hour-long comedy routine at an open mic, and he knew it. If somebody told me, oh, I have an alibi, you want to watch my hour-long comedy routine? I'd be like, I'm good, fam.
What would you rather do? Listen to the hour-long comedy routine or listen to Kumail do the entire A Few Good Men monologue? I heard that he actually remembered the entirety of it and did the
He's
whole
amazing.
thing on set, and they had to cut it down because it was like 5 minutes long.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's talk about something else that's amazing.
Yeah.
This episode, not only was it really funny, but it was extremely emotional for Charles and Oliver, and I loved it so much. It's so weird that we've been sitting here beefing about
I
this
know.
episode, but like, this had some of my most favorite moments of the whole season. And Charles talking to Oliver about, the bachelor party, and that he was just like, man, I just wanted to take you out and have like a dinner or a drink with you because you're my best friend and like you're my emergency contact. And I know I'm no longer going to be yours because you're going to be married. I'm going to be this third wheel. Like, I thought we were going to grow old together. And I was just like, it's so emotional. And them even trying to have this emotional talk where they're like, okay, we'll hold up our menus and not look at each other while we say these really important things to each other. It was so sweet and so heartwarming of these two men that had become such good friends, so important. And then Oliver asked him to be his best man. Why are you going to have a death at this wedding? We all know it's coming.
This is the crazy thing about Only Murder sometimes, is that, we can be really critical of certain things that don't work. And our biggest issue with this episode clearly is that the whole motivation and all the mechanics behind it aren't making a lot of sense. But in a way, we criticize because we love, and we love so much about the other stuff in this episode that it makes the other issues all the more glaring. Because the stuff with Oliver and Charles around the best man, the stuff of even them going and putting on the motion capture suits was really, really funny. The way that they did the audition was really, really funny. Like, all that worked, but it is a reminder too of what Charles is kind of going through, because as you get older, it gets harder and harder to either meet new friends or retain friends. And I think they really spelled that out in an important way, that what Charles is fundamentally afraid of is just, being alone. Like, so many people think of him as this washed up actor, to the point where he ends up getting this extra job just because of pity. And Oliver doesn't really see him that way. He sees him as an equal, even though they make fun of each other and all of that. And it's
they're
just
friends.
They're friends, and it's a legitimate fear that they have.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that's really important. I think all of us as fans of this show, like the real ones, we're all going to call out the things that we love, of course, because we're fans, right?
Of course.
But I think that fans will also call out when things don't work. And I think that that's what makes fans so special. I think we're not going to let properties like Only Murders in the Building, that is a phenomenal show, 10 out of 10, fun show, get away with things that just don't make sense. And I think that they will make it make sense in the finale.
Yeah.
We're going to get more answers. It's all gonna make sense. But this episode right now just doesn't make enough sense. Now there's one other interesting thing that they dropped in this episode, and it feels like a setup for next season. So while Mabel was, at the hospital, she saw a newscast behind her where it was the dry cleaning king of Brooklyn has been reported missing and has ties to the Caputo family. But officials do not suspect foul play. Why did they spend so much time on this newscast? And I think that this is my tinfoil hat theory. This is going to be the Dudenoff story next season. I don't think this is going to be the actual killer next season, the actual story that the trio is going to be on. I think there's going to be something that's going to loop around and tie in this other family and what happened to this dry cleaner. And it's going to tie it all in a way that will make kind of sense. Like Marshall has the code to the Dudenoff apartment because he was a student. And that it's like we took this huge Dudenoff ride to get to that one thing.
I think you're right. I had the same thought when we watched this episode, and this newscast just comes out of nowhere and they linger on it. It was really, really weird.
It was so weird.
I was just sort of sitting back and thinking, okay, what's going on here? So yeah, I think that that's going to be involved, either mentioned again in the finale, or it's going to be a big point next season. One more thing that I will say just about Oliver and Ron Howard is just that it was very nice for me to see Oliver actually have a win with this ridiculous story that was never going to be true. And then Ron Howard comes in and does the whole soup bit and calls him Ollie. It's just, I was so happy for him. And I'm speaking about him like he's an actual real person here, but it's just, we've all known people like this who tell these huge extreme stories that aren't really real. Like my grandfather was like this, and a lot of people were. But then to actually see something like that pay off, it's so endearing.
I love that payoff, that big fish story was real this time.
I know.
Because we do hear all these stories from Oliver, and we're just like, okay, and your next big celebrity story. But watching Ron Howard come in and do the soup thing, I was laughing so hard. This is easily the funniest episode of the season.
Yeah, congrats, guys, on really giving us some great, just really memorable comedy moments that we'll go back and watch. I mean, we'll talk a lot more about the cliffhanger at the end of this in our preview, because there's obviously pretty high stakes here for Mabel because she's in some big trouble. But
she has figured out that script is Saz's, and she is alone with Marshall in her apartment. It's her apartment.
Why didn't you guys just open that earlier? This is
another
problem. No, but that's fine. I understand that. But that's what we got here on Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 9. So hit that subscribe button so you do not miss our preview, our big discussion about the next victims. And as Jess said earlier, if you join our Patreon, our link is in the description below. Not only are we covering the Penguin exclusively there, but moving forward, we're also going to be doing Landman as well as Dune Prophecy. Thank you to our patrons for your support. We'll see you there next time.